Histograms are the holy grail of landscape photography exposure. In this video you will learn what a histogram is and how to use it live out on location to get perfect exposures every time.
So hello, good morning and welcome back to the channel. I want to talk to you today about the histogram. Now I was in a bit of a rush first thing because I thought I was going to miss the sunrise, but to be honest there's cloud banks all the way around me, so I don't think we're going to get a lot, but we'll get up there and see what we can find anyway. So I've come to a location known as Brentor Church. It's a location I've been to before, but I don't think I've actually vlogged here, and to be honest it probably isn't a place I would normally choose to do a vlogging sort of outing for you guys, because it isn't really ideal. It's not got a lot of different opportunities and locations, though it is a great spot. But it is ideal for what I want to talk to you about today. Is we're going to talk about the histogram. Now the histogram really is the holy grail of landscape photography exposure. Now if you've been following my exposure series, you'll see that I've already spoken about metering modes, exposure modes and everything else. Now all of these things are fantastic, but they only really allow you to do one thing. That is to take a meter reading, adjust what you're looking at, and base that on what we call 18% grey. And if you don't know what these terms are, then I'll really go back and have a look at the playlist and watch the other videos first. But today we're going to talk about the histogram, and if you threw away all the other metering modes that you've got, you could get spot on exposures just using the histogram. Now the reason that it is the holy grail is because if you do any editing or anything whatsoever, it really is all about getting the information into the camera so that when you get home you can edit that photograph. And provided you use the histogram and you understand where your highlights are and where your shadows are, you're going to get that right every single time. So I'm going to get up to where I'm going to take my photograph, and when we get to the top, what I'll do is I'll explain to you a bit more about a histogram, what it is and how we're going to use it to take our photographs. So it can get quite windy up at the top where we're going, so what I think I'll do is I'm going to explain to you the theory behind the histograms before we get up to the top and start taking photographs and using it in practice. Now, just so I get it right, I've got my notes on my phone. By magic, I'm going to put them up on the screen for you in a minute so that you can actually see them as well, and you could be able to follow through what I'm talking about. So don't worry, the theory is really quite basic and quite simple, and as photographers there's only so much about the theory that we need to understand, because when we're interested in using the tools, not understanding exactly how they work. So let's put this graph up on the screen and you understand a little bit more about what I'm talking about. So first of all, what is a histogram? Well, a histogram is basically, in layman's terms, a graph. And what we've got on the horizontal axis, that's the one that runs along the bottom of the screen, is we've got going from black on the left hand side all the way to bright white on the right hand side. Now some cameras can show it the other way around, some editing programs can show it the other way around, some of them are interchangeable and you can set your preferences up how you want. It really doesn't matter, but you can have black on one end and white on the other. Now the height of the chart shows you how many pixels you've got in the scene at that point. So if everything in the picture was completely jet black, you would have one long bar, it would be on the left hand side, and vice versa. If everything in the screen was bright white and no detail whatsoever, it would be all on the right hand side, and it would be one bar going right the way up to the top of the graph. So what are we looking for? Well, there isn't any right or any wrong when you look at a histogram. It really does depend on the scene that you're taking. Now obviously if you're taking a picture at night, predominantly you're dealing with darkness, you're dealing with dark objects. You may get some very bright spikes, and that's going to be sort of street lights, lighting, etc. Passing car headlights, reflections on water, anything like that, stars, the moon, something which is going to stand out really bright. And the other way around, if you took something on a really, really bright day, looking into the bright sky, don't look at the sun, it can damage your eyes, but looking into bright clouds, for example, they may go completely white and everything would be at the other end of the scene. So what is it we're trying to do? Well, what we're trying to do with the histogram is make sure that we've got that tonal range captured within the boundaries of the graph. So if everything's right over to the right hand side and you've got bright spikes, that is going to be where you're going to get your highlights burnt out. If everything is conversely all the way over to the other end of the screen where you've got your blacks, that is going to be where you've got really dark shadow detail. Now when photographers talk about clipping, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the situations where you've got detail or a complete lack of detail. In other words, you've gone beyond the capabilities of your camera and you're not able to record that information. So let's go up onto the top, take some photographs and show you some examples of what we would like to get from our exposures. It's actually going to be a reasonably easy day to demonstrate this and take the pictures, because looking at the light behind me at the moment, as you can probably see over my shoulder, there is very little in the way of sunrise to actually sort of light the scene up. But we'll see when we get to the top. Hopefully we'll still have something to take some pictures and show you exactly what it is I'm talking about. Right, let's get up to the top, shall we? Okay, there we go, first picture in the bag. I always tend to do that if I'm out shooting videos or even shooting for myself. I always take what I would call an in the bag picture, just to get one sorted, just in case things change. Because there's some clouds behind the church at the moment. They're not really too bad. I mean, they're not fantastic. It's not the sunrise I was hoping for, but anyway, it is better than nothing. Okay, so obviously I've already set the camera up and I've not taken a couple of pictures. But what I want to talk through is how the histogram works and how we use that to get exposure correct. So I'm going to switch my live view on, then I'm going to bring you around to the back of the camera with me so you can have a look at exactly what I mean and how it actually works. Now for this video, for the purpose of this, we're just using manual metering. We're using just a standard matrix metering mode, and no exposure bracketing. We're going to be using everything just on the histogram. So that's how the camera's set up for this. So let's get you around here so you can have a look at what I'm doing on the screen, and I can talk you through it as we're actually doing it. Okay, so here we are. Hopefully that's not coming out too badly for you. Now, you can go through on your camera in various different information that you put up on the camera back. So depending on what camera you've got, you can switch the information off and you can gradually bring it back on. Normally for the histogram, which is this little chart right at the top here, you actually normally need to have all the information up. Some cameras may work differently, but for the purposes of this one, that's how you really need to do it. So what I'm doing with this picture right now is I'm just adjusting the exposure roughly where it is. Now you can still see on the bottom of the screen down here whether you've got over or under exposure. So if we wind this up or down, if we take a meter reading, you'll be able to see that little marker bar go up and down. And because I've got the simulation on, you can also see the screen getting brighter and lighter. So that would typically, if we take the picture there, be our mid exposure, and that should give us a good picture. So let's just take one like that and see what happens. Now when we do that, if we look at it on the preview now, you can see you've got those flashing bits on the screen. Now what those were is they were the clipping warning. So they were basically saying to us that those bright areas of sky are actually overexposed. And we could, if we wanted to, just put some exposure compensation on till we get to the point where that no longer happens and we would know exactly where we are. There we go, so we've got a little bit over the top there still, but basically pretty much all of that is now correct as we want it to be. But there is another way of doing this, and you can do it using this little buddy up here, which is the histogram. Now if you notice, if we go all the way up to this end of the screen, you'll notice that the histogram moves right the way over to the right hand side. And if we take a picture there now, we're going to see that everything's going to be really overexposed. There's that clipping gone again, absolutely bonkers. And that's because the whole scene is overexposed. And as I said before, if we wind everything all down to the other way and take the picture down there, what we're going to get is pretty much a silhouette. Now that might suit you, different people like different pictures in different ways, and that actually might be how you want your picture to come out, but it is entirely up to you. So there's a whole range of different ways that you can do it. The reason we use the histogram though is to make sure that we get all the information on the camera, so that when we get back to the computer we can actually edit our images as we want to. So if I move the histogram so that we can see that we've not got any clipping and we've not got any dark areas, if you look at it there's not touching that end and it's not touching the other end, then we should just be able to take a picture there like it is now, and that will give us a reasonably well exposed image, and that would have all the detail in it that we need to make a good picture. Now what I would still do at that stage is I would still always bracket as well. Now it really is entirely up to you how you take your pictures and what you decide to do. For me personally, I always like to bracket if I can anyway, because I think bracketing is a very good practice to get into, because you never quite know until you get the finished image back on the screen at home whether or not you've captured all that information and all that detail that you wanted. So I'd always recommend bracketing. So I'm going to take those pictures now, the bracketed ones. I'm also going to stick around for a bit longer because I can see that the light may change a bit. So if I get any better images than the ones I've taken, I'll put those up as well. But I will put up the picture that I've just taken so that you can see how what we've talked about and what we've done with the histogram this morning translates into a completed image. So let's get that up on the screen for you now.
So this is the first photograph I took. I used the histogram in camera to get the best I could out of the image. But in post-processing I still had to adjust it just slightly, as you can see in this panel here. I've increased the exposure and reduced the highlights and whites to bring the lighter tones back into play. I've also darkened the shadows, bringing a bit more contrast back into the finished photograph. But it wasn't the last photograph that I took. As I said during the video earlier, the light was improving all the time, and soon the breaks in the cloud gave way to side lighting, adding warmth to the granite rocks, bringing in the lush greens and transforming the sky. This photograph took a little bit more editing than the last one, a case of where the contrast range was so far beyond the capabilities of the sensor, I had to use exposure blending in post-processing to solve the problem. Make sure you subscribe and I will include how I did that in my end of month video. Thank you for watching. It makes a big difference to my channel when you hit the thumbs up button, and it takes 2 seconds. Please consider subscribing and hit the bell icon. You will get notified of new updates. I'm inspired to make more content by your comments, so please get involved. Don't forget the newsletter and free ebook offer on my website. Until next time, get out, get creative and enjoy your photography.